Kevin Jordan says, are we seeing Europe finally taking some military responsibility for their own safety for the first time since World War II? Yes. See, these things are all tied together. There wouldn't be an Islamic problem in Europe if there wasn't a socialism problem in Europe. If Europe did not provide cradle-to-grave socialist benefits, then they would not have to import people to keep the Ponzi scheme going. The reason that they have this internal cancer of radicalism and terrorism is because their socialist worldview requires more people at the bottom of the pyramid than the top. And so not only did they bring in immigrants, they brought in immigrants who are having 7, 8, 9 kids, and some of these guys have 4 wives, so they have 20 kids. And they thought, well, great, that'll keep our social welfare state going. How stupid do you have to be? It's not, these people coming in here are not going to work their lives so that they can support French people. It's ridiculous. It's just silly. And that's why this country works. Now, I heard an argument that I thought was a very good argument, and the argument was this. We could have all the immigration in this country we want to if we didn't provide benefits. In other words, if we didn't provide benefits and there was no drain on the treasury, let anybody who wants to come here and work is fine. The more I think about that, the more I realize if you get people coming in here who are ready to work for $1 an hour, that's really not fair to people who are ready to work for $6 an hour. So belay that order. But yeah, they seem to finally be waking up to it. You know, they launched these strikes. The French launched these strikes. It was nice to see a Rafale fighter on full afterburners. The French Rafale is a cool-looking airplane. I didn't know if I'd ever live long enough to see it actually deployed in combat, but there they go. But, you know, you hear stories about we sent 7 airplanes, or we dropped 20 bombs, or we sent 20 airplanes and we dropped 20 bombs. You know, we dropped 20 bombs by accident. I mean, you know, I don't want to mock them. I'm glad they're doing something. The fact that they're doing something is important. And look, the fact that you can't buy a gun anywhere in Europe is an indication now that things have changed. This immigration flood, the pre-Paris invasion of these refugees has changed Europe's mind. I forget who said it. It wasn't me, but somebody said they've seen Islam, they don't like Islam, and they've had enough of Islam. Which again, of course, is unfair and awful for the people who aren't these jihadis. But then again, if you're a moderate Muslim and you see these people causing these things and you don't stand up and say this is terrorism and murder and we're French people and we support France and we utterly condemn this, you're not seeing any of that. That's the moral equation, right? If they're not willing to pick the side of civilization, then they are complicit in it. In the same way that 7% of the German people were Nazis, but all of them went along with it. That made them complicit in their own destruction. They knew what was going on. They may not have known about the death camps, but they knew that their neighbors were not in their apartments anymore, and they were moving into their apartments, and the fact that they didn't do anything about it made them complicit in what they got. 2 to go. I can't believe we got through all these, and we're not even at 2 hours yet. David Proctor says, another very left-wing friend of mine says that all the opposition she sees to allowing refugees in the U.S. seems to come from fear, not caution. I've tried explaining that I lock my doors not out of fear, but because I know it only takes one invader in my home to jeopardize everyone under my roof. How can we start getting the conservative story through the left-wing echo chamber? I said earlier, you know, that I'm going to say some things that some people might have some problems with. We are finding that these people are being vetted pretty well. I think this business about not letting them in because they're terrorists is not the issue. If it turns out that the governors do not have the constitutional authority to do this, then I have a problem with that too. Although God knows the liberals are saying, well, you don't understand, it's not up to the governors, it's up to the federal government. These people are awful quiet when it comes time for mayors to talk about sanctuary cities in direct contravention of federal law. I think a governor has a right to protect his state. This is the issue. this is the issue. If they're refugees, then when do they go home? If they're never going home, then are they willing to live by our rules and our laws and our cultural norms and not theirs? There it is in a nutshell. I think that's the answer. If somebody says you lack compassion for these people, tell them this. The people we're talking about are not people who stood in line for years, filled out forms, spent a fortune, and dedicated their lives to come to America to live here as citizens under our own laws. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are being imported into this country, many of whom are raised under the strictures of a religion that are antithetical to American values. And so the question is, are these refugees going to stay? And if they're going to stay, are they willing to give up their old life, their old values, and their old religious beliefs in exchange for ours? And if they are, then they're welcome. And if they're not, then they're not.